Hello everyone and welcome to this new video series on learning HTML5 with CSS3 and JavaScript. So our main focus of this video series will be to learn how to use HTML5 with CSS3 to create dynamic, perhaps static web pages, not dynamic. But what I mean is that we'll be touching on elements of learning the new JavaScript syntaxes. Perhaps if you really don't have an idea about how to use HTML5, so this is the point where you start. I'll be going from the very basic level of HTML and also the very basic level of CSS. And we'll also touch on some aspects of JavaScript, but we won't be going very deep with this scripting, perhaps the client-side scripting language that we know as JavaScript. So if you really do not have any idea, so it's your starting point. But if you do have some idea, then I guess you need to wait about a few video lessons where we touch on more of the advanced and the additional features of HTML5 and the new CSS3. So let's get started. The first thing that we need to look at is how a web page or how the internet works. You might not have the idea about how our interactions are occurring behind the scenes. So to give you a very basic idea, we need to I will be showing you how from the start of sending a request from your web browser to the response from the server, what happens, everything behind the scenes. So I'll be showing you, I'll be explaining everything that will be essential for this tutorial. Now you might be wondering, why do I need to learn about the network architecture or the web architecture? I'm not going to go very deep. The reason behind learning about this simple architecture in a simplified version is that we need to know, we need to learn, perhaps we need to keep in our knowledge that when we send a request and when we receive the page, there are things that are occurring and how we can use that to validate and test our scripts that we create in HTML and CSS. So let's not waste any more time and let's get started. So in here we're going to look at how a web application functions. Now you might have heard about Android applications, you might have heard about the iOS applications on Apple or iPhone, and you might also have heard about the Windows applications for Windows mobiles. Now the web applications are quite different than those applications. The web app is perhaps the website that I'm talking about. Why we refer to the why we actually call this a web app in modern terminology, because behind the scenes we have to create logic, we have to create the design, we have to create a layout, perhaps we need to even interact with the database to retrieve and store information permanently. So if you look at a website like Amazon.com, they've got a huge list of products on their website. So when you go to their website and if you look carefully and if you search for something, if you for example, if you want to buy a book on their website, you search for the book, then the website gives you all the details, even with the picture, the reviews that comes underneath it, underneath the web page. Now what that web page or what that website perhaps is doing is that it's retrieving everything from the server. Now the server in our modern terminology has different sites. We'll be looking at those sites very shortly, but let's bear with me. In here you can clearly see that we have the client, it's the user. What I mean by the client is the user. So when you sit on your web browser, you're actually the client or the user. So if you type in google.com, google.com on your web browser and you immediately receive the search engine's page, that means you have gone from your web browser to the internet. This is represented by the cloud. Now the internet is a huge thing. I'm not going to explain every detail about the internet because my intention is not to teach you how the internet functions. My intention is to teach you how this web app is functioning, or perhaps the website is functioning. So your request for google.com goes to the internet. It's then routed to the Google's server that's located in California, I guess. Yeah. So it reaches the Google server, and the server reads that some user from an address, some user from certain location has requested the homepage of Google. So it reads that information, and it then retrieves that page and sends it back through the internet, through the cloud, to on your web browser. So you finally get that page, and you can then go on and search whatever you like. Now the point I'm trying to make in here is that the web app is not a static application anymore. It's not a static, it's not a single page anymore. What you see when you when you receive the Google's page is just it's just a web page. But behind the scene, you have an entire application that's working to perform all the interactive interactions, and it's also working to provide the logic behind the scenes that we can't really see, and neither can we even view it on our web browser. So everything happens behind the scene. Now the web app, why am I talking about this web app? A website nowadays is a full-fledged web app. It's running on a server, it has a database, it can interact with the database, it has logic, it has programming languages, it has the declarative language, it has the it has the markup language like the HTML. So yeah, you don't need to freak out right now. Perhaps I'm going to explain all of that. So basically that's the idea. You first request the page like google.com, you write the google.com, that's the address. So when you suppose you want to visit your friend's house, but you really don't know where he lives, so you ask your friend about his address. So he gives you the address. So the first thing, you are the this is you. Let's consider this client as you. So you go to this city. Perhaps you might live in the suburb. So you travel to the city, and he might even, let's consider that he gave you an address that's situated at the end of the city, at one end of the city. Perhaps it's on the eastern side of the city, and you live on the western side of the city. So you get the address, and let's consider this cloud as the city center. Okay, so we get this. So let's consider this to be you. The client is you, and you travel all the way with your car to the city center, and then you find your way through the city center downtown, and you travel towards the eastern side of the city, and you locate the address. You locate the address of your friend's house. So that's exactly what what happens behind the scene for a web app. The client, when you sit on the web browser and you write google.com on the address bar, that google.com is actually the address. So when you write that address on the browser goes to the internet. It goes to the city center. So let's consider this, as we're considering this to be a city center. The browser goes to the internet. This entire cloud, it's going to search its way. It's going to walk through all the routers and all these roads, and it's finally going to find the path towards Google server. So when it finds the path towards Google server, it sees that google.com is a certain address, and it has a server, and that address has a server residing at the other end. So when the server receives the request, now when you write google.com, you just don't write the address. Perhaps you as a user is writing the address, but behind the scenes your web browser in here is what it's doing. It's taking the address and it's also appending, perhaps it's also adding something with the address. You are not actually seeing what it is adding to your address. It's telling, perhaps it's adding something called an HTTP response. We'll be looking at that very shortly. So it's adding something called a response body. So that response body has something of a text like please I need the page that is residing on google.com on this address. So it's appending something like that. So when that entire request, perhaps it's the request body, sorry for that, sorry for the mistake, it's not a response body, it's a request body. So when the request body along with the address reaches the server reads the request body and it retrieves that single page that you're requesting, that page of Google that we all know. Now when it reaches the end, the server then looks at the address. You do have an address of your own. Now if you didn't have an address, the server wouldn't know where the request is coming from. So to understand how that request is occurring and from where it is occurring, you need to have some sort of location. You need to have some sort of address. So your web browser is doing three things together. First, it's taking the address that you are typing, suppose google.com, then it's adding a request body. Inside that request body, it's writing something like I need Google's web page. Then it is also adding something. It's also adding your own address, so that when the server receives the entire request, it can look at your location. So it looks at the location, it retrieves the web page of Google, that page that we all know, and then